Thank you very much, and let me just spend 2 seconds to thank Sepa and my friend, the President Jose Nart, and also SIdP, Nicolas Forta, and most of all, Sandro Martina, that I think that there is something more than only a collaboration, but I hope and I'm quite sure that there is a specific and particular feeling with us. And the topic that I'm going to cover today, I will try just to give you insight, because this is not the typical topic of Giovanni, that I speak about, because most of the time I'm invited to speak about only gingival recession, implants, and today the topic was also how the soft tissue and the restorative phase can have an interaction. And we can start really from the beginning, when the idea was that if there is a tooth that has no cardiac lesion, because you see that there is not only gingival recession, we have to restore this tooth first, and we have to give the right emergence profile. So this is done before whatever type of surgery we make, and then in relation to the amount of keratinized tissue we have, in relation to the depth of the concavity we have at the level of the root, we are used to using or not the connective tissue graft, and then to coronary advanced flap to completely cover it, in order to take the advantages of both the coronary advanced flap, so you don't see any difference in color, texture, and surface characteristics with respect to the adjacent teeth, but at the same time you give attached, firm, good quality of connective tissue. So this was the starting point, but the problem of this was how this composite can, let's say, be nice as the patient wants, because of the change of the color, because of the change of the quality of the surface. And so what I'm just sharing you is that, yes, composite restoration is something that is absolutely necessary in order to give stability to our surgical procedure, in order to give a good emergence profile to our patient. But this is not the final solution that we can give to our patient. So we can make our surgery, make a site-specific application of the connective tissue graft only where there is the indication, no good quality of keratinized tissue, and then we have a good outcome for our patient. But maybe this is not something that the patient accepts for the long term, because it's more difficult to change the space, to change the papilla height. And so what is very important is to understand that the composite restoration can also be considered a temporary restorative phase, because what do your restorative dentist has to do? He has to use your composite restoration exactly like the enamel when the veneers are prepared. So the restorative dentist don't have to go to remove the composites and prepare back, which there is the soft tissue above, and this is really a big mess. But you have to use the composite restoration as the enamel, and the adhesion of the veneers to the composite restoration is even much better than the adhesion you can achieve between the restorative phase, the veneers, and the dentin that has been exposed in the first surgical intervention. So you see that this patient, at the time of the veneering, is really happy, because there is not only a change at the buccal aspect, but there is also a complete closure of the interproximal aspect. And so please, first message I'd like to share with you, do the composite restoration, because they are necessary in order to achieve the good emergence profile, the good increase in the soft tissue thickness, the good stability of the blood clot at the end of the surgery. And then, whenever the patient decides, use the composite restoration as the original enamel of the tooth, and make what you are much better than me to do, so to give the best aesthetic to this patient, because this will remain stable because of the surgical procedure that was performed, like in this case, 11 years before. So this is the first message. And also such a case in which, yes, you can be very good in your mucogingival restorative approach, so you make the new restoration, you make your mucogingival approach with a site-specific application of the connective tissue graft. And so, for the patient, yes, it's a good outcome, but, generally speaking, for the patient, nothing changed so much, only covering the root. So we cannot consider root coverage as the only indication for mucogingival therapy. It's also to prepare our patient for the final outcome that should be really satisfactory for our patient. And what is incredible is that these veneers are all of them out of the soft tissue, so they just get into the sulcus area because they are prepared to the previous composite restoration that was done 5, 10, 11 years before. So you see that this is a situation in which the patient can say, yes, I had the right treatment, but with no restorative phase. The treatment I did as a mucogingivologist, if you want, for sure, was not good enough for our patient. So this is the first indication I would like to give you in terms of relationship between soft tissue management and restorative phase. The second one is that a traditional one, a patient that has big problems, not only for aesthetic point of view. You see that here we need to restore the patient 100% in terms of aesthetics, and this is the role of your restorative dentist that has to make the planification from an aesthetic point of view of what is the final goal. And what your restorative dentist has to do is to do exactly what maybe shouldn't be done from a perio point of view. So it should remove the post, it should restore endo retreatment, restore the post. And you can see here what he did terribly at the level of the bone crest. Is this a problem if this patient has to go to restorative resective surgery? No. What is important that when you make your surgical procedure, you have the exact final line into which you can, let's say, place your bone crest. We all know that the mucogingival surgery is a critical part also from the resective surgery, so we have to anticipate our surgical incision line in relation to the final position of the bone crest that we have already in our mind according to the aesthetic planification that our restorative dentist did. The flap is elevated split at the level of the papilla, full at the buccal aspect. This is something that we all know. We need also to thin the palatal flap, to remove the secondary palatal flap, and then we have to start to change the bone like it is the soft tissue. So to make the aesthetic parameters at the level of the bone. So it's not only enough that the parabola, bone parabola, at the level of the lateral is more commonly displaced with respect to the bone parabola at the level of the central, which should be at the same level of the parabola of the current, but we have to replace exactly the same thing on the other side. So we do one side first, and then we have the mirror, and we can change also the second side by reshaping the bone, giving the right distal tenet. So what we have to do with the soft tissue has to be done exactly with the hard tissue. When we manage, we also have to consider the favorable effect. So if there is a distance between the composite restoration and the bone, we have to expect at least 1.8 or 2 millimeters of distance. But you look at the bone crest at the level of the lateral, at the level of the lateral on one side, and the level of the contralateral. So you see sometimes, for aesthetic reasons, you have to make ostectomy. It doesn't mean that you are removing bone to the patient, you are giving aesthetic to the patient, because if you have the bone crest, interproximal bone crest in this side here, and in the other side, because of the femoral effect, because of the periodontal disease at the other side, you cannot have the true papilla in different level, because this patient will never smile for the rest of the patient's life. So sometimes also ostectomy has to be done in relation to the aesthetic parameters. And finally, obviously, we have to close everything and make only the interproximal bone here by secondary intention. But the key of the success of this approach is to anticipate as much as possible the restorative phase. So what is our approach is we make the surgery, and at the time of suture removal, what is done is just to take an impression of the final position of the soft tissue, and there is a small movie. This is Carlo Monaco. This is Carlo Monaco, which is working at 3 weeks. At 2 weeks, you remove the temporary crown, take a final impression of the final position of the soft tissue. that was apically positioned, so the biological width has already been restored. And now what still we are waiting for is the sulcus formation. But we have the whole length of the abutment that we can restore, that we can prepare in a definitive way and control the growth of the tissue, which is called conditioning at the level of the papilla mainly, in order to make this papilla grow as much as possible, because we make the final preparation of the abutment with the new temporary crown only at 3 weeks from time of the surgery. And so in relation to where we place our contact point, in relation to where we place the emergence profile of the temporary crown, we will decide to guide and to make the papilla grow a bit more or a bit less. You see, this is the final preparation. Now the Professor Monco has already temporary crown, because 1 week before was taken impression at the time of suture removal of the final position of the soft tissue 2 weeks after the surgery, and this is the rebasement of the temporary crown. And obviously this is also published, and this is the timing that we make, because it's continuously necessary to follow this patient, because this papilla still had enormous amount of potential to grow, despite the great apical position of the flap that was done at the level of the surgery. So this is the patient at 3 weeks. This is the patient after the end of the conditioning phase. And when you see before and after, it seems impossible that we removed so much bone, that we did so much plastic. But what is important is really the harmony between the papilla. Then today we have obviously the best way to make everything digital, because this is also minimally invasive for our patient in terms of preparation. So there is a lot that the restorative dentist has to do in order to, let's say, make our tissue grow. But really, I absolutely believe that soft tissue management with no good restoration do not have the final outcome that the patient would like to have. So this is the patient before, this is the patient at the time of the final impression, this is the final restoration just in place, this is the smile of the patient, the radiographic control in 1 year, and you see that in 9 years' time, this is the patient of the university, so it's not the patient that is so rich that can do everything, but this is really great stability, and obviously this patient was treated in the same way also in the remaining of the dentition. But look at what was the situation at the level of the bone, intrasurgically. You don't have to be worried. You have to remove bone. Removal of bone is necessary for the aesthetic outcomes. So you don't have to be too much conservative. Sometimes this is the reason of your aesthetic failure. Let's move to periodontal regeneration, because this is also a topic that is important, because it's not only a matter of saving tooth, but the patient would like to have a lateral incisor that is also aesthetically nice. And so what we have to do in this patient is, first of all, to identify the reason, and it's not true that whatever type of defect that reach the apex has to be endodontically treated. You have to make a very, very atraumatic non-surgical therapy with ultrasonic cone that makes this defect heal. And when you make your surgical procedure, you have to consider that the main problem for this patient is the position of the papilla. So you have to do something in order to improve the position at the level of the papilla. And now we have a surgical procedure that allows us not only to treat the defect, but to improve the soft tissue at the level of the buccal aspect, the gingival section, at the level of the papilla. And then the restorative dentist comes back in order to make what we have done in terms of soft tissue augmentation the patient happy, because again, soft tissue augmentation is not enough. What we do in this technique is to make a palatal incision. The supracrestal soft tissue that is covering the bony defect is separated at the level of the palatal aspect, and it is moved to the buccal aspect. So since the papilla is connected to the buccal flap, when you advance your buccal flap, you can also take the advantage of advancing this tissue, which is not only the papilla, but it's the entire supracrestal soft tissue that was cut from the palatal flap with a very, very long bevel incision, and so it's a very, very good amount of connective tissue that will close at the end. Obviously, we have to make also periodontal regeneration, so we have to clean, we have to apply ADTA, we have to apply amelogenesis, but the key is now to create a barrier for the soft tissue to shrink, and for the papilla that we elevated coronally with our flap in order not to collapse in the suprabony component of the defect. So again, mucogingival approach, because this connective tissue graft has two roles. At the level of the two adjacent teeth, can reduce the risk of gingival recession, but what is more important of all, gives stability to the blood clot because of the lack of the buccal bone, not only in the infrabony component, but also in the suprabony component. And since the papilla will be moved more coronal with respect to the connective tissue graft wall, this papilla will be reduced in its tendency to shrink in apical direction because of the barrier effect of the connective tissue graft. Now, we complete our coronal advancement of the flap, and the only thing that we have to do at the end is to put back the original better incision into the palate with the supracrestal soft tissue. And for this, you see how it is easy. You use a 7-0 suture with a very, very short needle. You connect the palatal flap, you take your isthmus, you see perfectly where you have to place your needle, and so when this tissue goes back to the palatal aspect, you achieve a first intention wounding under a line that is very short, that is your incision line, but the length and the amount of connective tissue that is facing is as long as you were able to complete your bevel incision. So it's really a surgical technique that makes everything here very, very uneventful. So this is the single step. Look at the concavity at the level of this lateral, the amelogenous application, the dimension of the isthmus, the length of the bevel, 6 millimeters of bevel. I was able to dig in the palate, the wall that is working for the supra-infrabony component of the defect, amelogenous application again, first intention, wound healing, time of suture removal, and now we have to wait. You have to wait for this papilla to grow in thickness first, but this is not enough. You will never see the patient happy only leaving the soft tissue here. You need somebody that is capable to use this increasing the soft tissue thickness in order to make it creep in coronal direction. So this is after the restoration, which was done by Professor Monaco, and now you see how much it is important for this patient to recover the papilla. It's not enough to have the black and white aesthetics. The patient wants to have also hair, or his aesthetics. In this case, it's hair, as you can see, but it's really very important in order to be able. So thanks to the progressive changes that you can make with the composite restoration, exactly like at the buccal aspect, you make the papilla grow in coronal direction. And as much as the time passes, you see that the papilla is completely filling the interproximal area. In the meantime, also the bone is healing. And what is the final outcome is that now you have the coverage of the canal, the coverage of the lateral, and the papilla that is completely filling the space between the lateral and the canal. And this is the time for the final restorative phase that can be done with the veneering solution using the composite restoration, exactly like we did in mucogingival surgery when we had only gingival resection at the buccal aspect. Another indication where I can see many relationships between perio soft tissue and restorative phase are those conditions in which you see the patient came to me for gingival resection, because everybody comes to me only for gingival resection, but sometimes it's always better to make also the regular, and you see that there is an infrabony defect due to root resorption that was treated not accordingly at the level of the lateral. Again, what do you do here? Crown lengthening, root extrusion. Obviously, there are all alternatives, but I think that what we have today in our hands is really the possibility to solve this clinical situation in the best way in order to give our patient the best aesthetic outcome. Again, the connective tissue wall technique allows us to achieve really what we need. So this is the radiographic situation compared to the clinical situation. This is how we manage this case, which is exactly the same thing as I did it before. Palatal incision, push the supracrestal soft tissue buccally, include the papilla in the buccal flap. So when you move your buccal flap in one time, you cover both the recession, but also you can move your papilla in a more coronal position. Obviously, if you leave your papilla connected to the palatal flap and you make your buccal incision, you will never be able to improve the papilla height because the papilla is connected to a tissue that is firm. Now you have to do, obviously, the root planing procedure because there is an infrabony defect, but now you need also somebody who is capable to restore this defect intrasurgically. Intrasurgically means being able really to isolate the defect, and this is something that the infrabony component of the defect helps you to do. So you see this is the composite restoration that is completely finished. At the time of the restoration, we also make a good finishing line of the composite restoration at the level of the canal. So now you can see that everything is done, but there is also the wall. The wall, what does it mean? This wall that prevents the soft tissues to shrink will make also the papilla grow above this composite restoration. But since we know that there will not be attachment at this area that was restored intrasurgically, we have to increment the thickness of the tissue. And some of you can say, yes, in this way you create a pocket. Pocket is a pocket when the probe goes in. This is a pocket. Okay? So, pocket means that you create a transmucosal zone that is something that you are going to speak the whole 2 days at the level of the implant. Then we know that it's a risk area where there is risk of broken pocket depth if the patient do not control the area accordingly. So the question is this patient healthy? Look at the papilla now that is completely filling the interproximal space. And also when you look at the radiographic reaction, you can see that it's so nice that the bone gets exactly at 1 millimeter distance from the intrasurgical restoration in order to restore the supraterrestrial connective tissue fibers. So we know that we are at risk, but what is the alternative? I mean, is the alternative to remove the implant? And if you to remove the tooth and place an implant, if you place an implant, you will have a transmucosal zone that is at risk of bacterial colonization. So, you know, what is important really is to make your patient happy and to make your dental hygienist aware that there is a risk area that she or he has to control a bit more carefully than the remaining dentition, because this is an area where there is risk of broken pocket depth, which doesn't mean that there is broken pocket depth because there is some amount of horizontal bone loss. So this is the situation of the patient. So we see that we get an improvement in the aesthetics, improvement in the coverage, improvement in the papilla area, together with a very, very good emergence profile of the composite restoration, and also very, very good radiographic reaction to our restorative and surgical phase, because everything was done following the biological principle of the healing. And let me, so this is the distance, infrabony defect, most apical extension of the defect. This is 1 year, and this is 3 years, where there is very, very nice radiopacity of the level of the bone that makes us happy, together with the absence of the probing. I don't have to show you the probing, because if I show you the probing and I don't push the probe, I can tell you it's not probing. What you should know is that they should not probe. But before probing, don't forget that this area will bleed. And the role of the dental hygienist is really to see this patient, or at least this site, a bit more frequent than the patient itself, in order to be sure that there is no superficial bleeding. And as I am used to doing always, I want to be also provocative, and that's the only reason why I'm presenting you this case, because this is really a case that is provocative. How we can manage our patient with periodontal, severe periodontal disease, but make also this patient happy. I don't know if it's for the rest of the patient's life, but we don't know how long our life will last, and this is something that nobody knows. So this is the patient who came to me because of the very, very aggressive periodontal disease in the old patient mouth, and this was the situation of the central. And here we cannot speak about really periodontal regeneration, because the amount of infrabony component of the defect, yes, there is, but it's not what makes the difference from the patient. If I treat this infrabony component and the defect and give the radiographs before and after and say, oh, dear patient, you are healthy. Yes, the patient is healthy, but we are speaking about the central incisor, lateral and canine, the aesthetic area, and she's about 32, 33 years. So it's exactly the age that I like girls. So this is the concept. Can we do something also suprabony
in order to improve, I'm not sure, the level of attachment because you need storage, but at least biologically working in order to improve the quality of the attachment in the suprabony component together with making also the infrabony component of the defect here. So the concept is again to apply what we have learned from the treatment of single type gingival recession with the connective tissue wall technique that I show you both in the periodontal disease case but also in the case of root resorption, is to apply for the old sextile, frontal sextile, and this is what I call conservative surgery. Why it's conservative? Because we want to maintain the position of the soft tissue where they were, at least, before the surgical procedure. So also the non-surgical phase of this patient must be very conservative. You have to use ultrasonic point of different diameter and of different length in order to get to the deepest portion of the pocket without creating any curettage, unintentional curettage at the level of the soft tissue, so to minimize the soft tissue shrinkage, because my idea in this case was to get an improvement also of the soft tissue. And if you look at the baseline situation, the situation at the level of the papilla, of the lateral incisor, this was the best papilla I had in the patient, and for every single papilla we made exactly the same job that we did at the level of the single type defect. So we elevate from the palatal to the buccal aspect. We keep this isthmus very, very careful with atraumatic tweezers, and we can see how long is the bevel I can make into the palate, and the more is the suprabony component of the defect, the more is the amount of tissue that you can maintain when you push your tissue from the palatal to the buccal aspect. Now, obviously, you have to advance your flap because you want to advance also the papilla together with your flap and try to give at least the same position of the papilla of the patient at the beginning, so to have any worsening of the gingival recession at the level of the papilla. This is the intrasurgical root planing, because we didn't do root planing before the surgery, not to create any unintentional curettage to the soft tissue. We only use ultrasonic point in order to have the complete removal of the bleeding on probing, and this is the situation of the bone. So we are really in a condition. So what we did in this case is it was not a study. This is my patient. I would like she becomes my girlfriend at the end of the therapy, not at the beginning. And so I tried to do the best for her. So there was the papilla of the second quadrant that was much more shrink with respect to the papilla of the first quadrant. And so what I decided to do is to use a connective tissue graft in the suprabony component of the defect, because here there was no bone peak. It's not like in the case in which I have also the advantage of taking the bone peak of the adjacent tooth only in the suprabony component. So this is slit sutures that turns around the palatal aspect of the tooth that stabilize the connective tissue graft at the level of the papilla where you want to stabilize them, and if possible to give them a improvement thanks to the increase in the thickness. So after the conservative surgery, we apply the connective tissue graft at the level of the papilla that we want to improve, and then it's very easy to close everything to the palatal aspect, because we made such a long bevel into the palatal aspect that the only thing that we have to do is to make the palatal tissue. In this case, we prefer to use some matrix suture because there is no peak that maintains our papilla in coronal direction, and so this helps to have the incision line at the level of the palatal aspect perfectly facing with the palatal flap, and so single 7-0 6mm long needle PGA suture are more than enough to achieve a complete soft tissue healing, everything into the palatal aspect. So this is the end of the surgery. The single steps looks how long are the bevel, the elevation of the single supracrestal soft tissue, the coronal advancement to the flap, deep and superficial incision. And so this is the summary of the situation. And what do you think I achieved in this patient? I don't know why there's so many pictures, that shouldn't be. This is the patient. Do you think that I did a lot for this patient? If I show you the radiograph, this is the patient after 3 years. And maybe you say, oh my God, you took a connective tissue graft, you made a surgery, and the patient is still ugly. Yes, that's the truth. That's the truth. So now the patient is healthy, but she's not married, nobody wants to have sex with her. That's the truth. Because when you see, the radiograph, and I will show you, from a radiographic point of view, I really achieved the best. Look, this is the distal papilla, no change, some small shrinkage. This is the papilla where I didn't have the connective tissue. But take a look a bit more carefully at the level of the papilla where I add the connective tissue. A lot of things have changed. Not only in height, but especially in thickness, and this is because the drifting of the teeth. So now the question is, can my restorative dentist this increase in soft tissue thickness and height in order to give a true improvement of the aesthetic outcome of our patient? So this is the healing of the bone. I think that from a bone point of view, from a career point of view, I can say, yes, I treated periodontal disease, but the patient is not happy. The patient still cannot smile. And so we have also to think how much we can do in our patient with the soft tissue management by adding this connective tissue graft, but with no Professor Monaco. You cannot do nothing, because it's the restorative dentist that will enhance the potential of this tissue that we gave surgically to increase. So now it starts the big job. And the big job really needs great prosthodontic, and obviously I don't want to get in details. This is at 3 years after the veneering situation, and I think that this is the response of the bone. And when I will show you the radiograph of before and after, this is the smile of the patient. This is after 6 years from the time of the surgery. So please take a look of this area. And this is really what the patient would like to achieve. And when you say, oh, okay, the patient is happy, but now she has pocket, and when you remember what was the situation of the bone and where are the position of the tissue now, I think that you have really to believe in the potential of the soft tissue augmentation together with the restorative phase. And now if you look at the radiograph, it seems that it's really another patient. Obviously, it's also because we changed the cemental junction, but the amount of bone remaining on this root, they are all vital, is absolutely something that, in my opinion, gives also the possibility of to think that this patient will maintain this teeth with the best aesthetic for the rest of the patient life, or I don't know, in this life. Let me conclude. This is really some suggestion, take-home message. You make a restoration, okay, and when the finishing line of your restoration is the, let's say, in the sulcular area, so you don't go too much subgingival, they need to increase the thickness of the connective tissue graft is in relation to the mucogingival parameter, lack of keratinized tissue, concavity, etc. But if there is to increase the papilla, you need to add a connective tissue graft. That's the first, let's say, take-home message. Whatever is the situation, and you need to make a restoration subgingival, like root resorption. In this case, since you know that there is no way to have a connective tissue attachment to the area that is restored, you need to augment soft tissue thickness. And when somebody says, yes, but it's risk, the only thing that you have to answer is, I created a transmucosal zone like we do every single day around implants. And finally, let me conclude with that, yes, it's not said that by reducing bone, by making mastectomy, by making resective surgery, we always have to consider an improvement, let's say, a compromise from a aesthetic point of view. Let's make the soft tissue management in the right way, increase the soft tissue when you need more papilla, and then work with the best restorative dentists of the world. Thank you very much for your attention.